Welcome to War Room Impeachment, 12 November, year of our Lord 2019, broadcasting live from the Breitbart Embassy on Capitol Hill within yards of the Supreme Court and right, I guess, across the plaza from the nation's capital, where tomorrow the impeachment, the formal impeachment process, the hearings on the 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, will commence, a historic day. This is episode 25 in our, we have live radio broadcast plus a podcast. It's up everywhere. And Raheem, you want to tell me later what people have to do to hit the, whatever button they have to hit to get the podcast, so we start getting some reviews on this. But I understand the thing is on fire, as somebody that knows podcasts said earlier today. I want to thank the John Fredericks Radio Network for having us on. Raheem Kassam, Jason Miller. Raheem was Nigel Farage's wingman in the rise of UKIP and was there for Brexit and is an expert at mass communications, political warfare. And basically was one of the leading personages that at least got the UK to vote to leave the EU. It's all to be determined whether they're going to leave or not. A general election there on December 12th. Jason Miller was chief communications strategist for the 2016 Trump victory and also was the transition communications director for the Trump campaign. Has been a communications specialist, run many war rooms for candidates, grassroots candidates and conservative candidates like Ted Cruz and others for many, many, almost, I guess, decades is what we say. So these two gentlemen know what they're doing. Historic, we're on the eve of history. So Jason, I want to turn to you. You've been around this town for a long time, worked on a lot of campaigns, a lot of presidential campaigns. What set the stage for us? What's going to happen tomorrow?
So tomorrow, this is going to become a complete circus. This will envelop every bit of oxygen in Washington, in politics, but not just in Washington, around the country. And Steve, you hit on this, I believe it was earlier this morning, or maybe it was yesterday's show on Sunday, but this is where the local news is, your local ABC, NBC, CBS affiliates. This will start dominating their coverage. And in fact, tomorrow, it's my understanding that all the major broadcast news outlets will be taking this live up until about noon or so. So think about that. Price is Right, soap operas,
Dr. Oz.
Dr. Oz, The View. Oh, that's probably good because they're terrible. But all these shows are pushed to the side. This is full-time, around-the-clock, in-your-face programming. This is where it goes from really being kind of this inside the bubble New York, D.C. thing, and then the media is getting out there, and a lot of people actually think President Trump's already been impeached. But now this is going to be so in your face that anyone who's not caught up to speed yet is going to feel that, wait, are we back at Watergate? What is this?
In the way in both Watergate and the Clinton situation is when they started to have public hearings that galvanized the nation. It became much-watched TV. It was the water cooler discussion. People were arguing, is tomorrow, now that we're in the era of podcast or serial TV, where does the first couple of episodes have to grip the nation? Are the Democrats rolling the dice on how the curtain comes up and the show runs tomorrow?
Absolutely. And part of the reason we're doing this pushback effort with myself and Steve and Raheem here is to let folks know there is a way to fight back. You can get your message out right away. We are no longer, as it was during the Clinton impeachment trial, though Clinton, you had a little bit of the cable TVs coming in, but back saying Watergate, you had ABC, NBC, CBS, Washington Post, New York Times. That's it. You had no other means of pushing back. Now, with podcasts and around your face, different outlets for people to talk, we can go and push back on this, because here's what's going to happen tomorrow. Let's say that some of these, in these actual live interviews with Taylor and with Kent, which we're going to get into Kent in a big league way in a few minutes here, the way that they respond on camera, if they're duds, if they look like Bob Mueller. Remember, I never thought Mueller was going to be explosive, and then he came up there and it was embarrassing. At least we have three killers on this committee to go and cross them up.
We've had, and this is the risk I think the Democrats take. In the last 90 days or a couple of months, we've had two nationally televised episodes that were supposed to be showstoppers and game changers. Bob Mueller first, and then Corey Lewandowski coming up for the obstruction. Both of those blew up in Jerry Nadler's face, right? Both of those blew up and didn't turn out. Are the Democrats, they're not TV producers, obviously. Are they rolling the dice tomorrow?
Absolutely. I mean, they're saying their Game 1 World Series pitcher are a combination of Bill Taylor and George Kent. And think about that for a moment. I mean, they're putting everything on the line for these two, and then they're saying former Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch is their other starting pitcher. If these three don't come in and just start throwing 100-mile-an-hour heat and striking out every single Republican batter, they're going to be in a world of hurt. We can turn this around and absolutely play smash-mouth football with them on this.
It got me. The Republicans put out today or overnight that the House put out. And in fact, we had Mark Meadows on here, one of the killers. And as we know, we haven't heard, as of right now, a showtime of 6:12 Eastern Standard Time at the Breitbart Embassy, that any of the killers, either Lee Zeldin, Mark Meadows, or Matt Gaetz, have been added to the intel. We haven't heard that so far.
Right. Not that, but I have talked to a couple of members this evening who do think there's a chance we can get some of the folks added for Friday. I'm a little skeptical just because I don't think GOP leadership wants to do that. I think they want to keep the votes all friendly and happy in case we ever get the majority back. But this isn't the time to go and screw around with playing nice. In fact, Mike Conaway, who we hammered on over the weekend as being a real piece of dead weight, so Manu Raju from CNN catches him in the hallway, and first of all, he gets Congressman Lee Zeldin, who's one of the killers, and he asks if Bill Taylor is a credible witness. And Zeldin says, no, he is not. Second, third, fourth hand, no hand information, in some cases giving opinions in one case. That's Zeldin's answer.
Listening to the show.
Mike Conaway, retiring member from Texas, as I described him in our earlier podcast, he's kind of the old yeller of the Republicans on House Intel. He says, quote, I think, yeah, he is a credible witness. That's Mike Conaway. That's one of the Republican members on the House Intel Committee supposedly defending President Trump in tomorrow's hearing.
Not helpful.
No, it's anti-good.
Anti-good. The thing that got me is that has there been, since this 18-page memorandum came out, is it buzzy? And this came out from, I guess, from McCarthy and leadership, but it was to kind of lay out, I guess the Permanent Select Committee actually put it out, but it had to be approved by leadership. This was to look at the alternative argument that they're making, that it's not an impeachable offense. We are actually making the argument the president's making that it was a perfect phone call. There's nothing to see here. This is all a policy debate between unelected bureaucrats who may be well-intentioned and the president who won the election. Two things. Is this getting any traction or buzz, which I haven't heard about? And what about Meadows' comment that only a half a dozen, he thinks, members have actually gone through the transcripts?
No, it's getting no buzz simply because 18 pages is way too long. I mean, that's people don't have time to consume all that information. And look, the problem we have is this issue is so complicated, so in-depth. There's a lot of real work that has to be done here. A lot of members are too lazy to do the work. A lot of people, even in the media and kind of the pundocracy that's out there, they're too lazy to do the real work in this. And so giving them 18 more pages guarantees they'll read 0 pages.
So we're here to do the real work for you. That's why one of the reasons we have this show is to be able to deconstruct the testimony, to basically go through people's backgrounds, to make connections. We're not here to denigrate people, particularly people who have been public servants, but to go through what these connections are. So we have a couple of those we want to do tonight. I think we got some Cooper testimony. We're going to hold back on our surprise Hillary Clinton guest appearance. We'll get to that a little later. But let's go to that, and then you've got an individual. You want to make somebody famous today. So we'll start with Raheem. What do we have here as far as testimony and observations?
Look, I just want to make clear to underscore something that Jason just said. You know, when 18 pages lands in your inbox, as it did this morning with the GOP memo, it's not.
I normally scream at Raheem, "Have you read this yet?"
It's exactly what you text me this morning. But it's not just that, ordinary people are not going to sit there and consume this first thing in the morning, which, by the way, there are lots of things in that memo that people should know. It's also that journalists are not going to consume all of that. They're certainly not going to go and do the background work required on every single one of those points. They're not going to be pulling out little nuggets, as Nancy Pelosi did with her 4-pager or 5-pager the very first day that we started this show. It was very easily
with great graphics and highlighted
and
things,
was double spaced,
right, yes.
And it was there to be consumed. It was there to be shared. I don't think this document is a bad thing at all. It lays out some very compelling arguments, and it actually shows more than the Republicans have done thus far on the entire issue. Frankly, apart from our killers, this is the pièce de résistance as far as they're concerned. But it's not presented in a format that even allows news editors to go through this at the beginning of the day and fashion stories around it. It's not going to play into the news cycle tonight on the televisions at all. And that's a very, very strange problem to have one day before, as you say, Steve, one of the most historic days in modern history.
But this is what Jason has been saying. One of the things, aspects of the killers, and the killers of these congressmen, Jordan being one, but also Mark Meadows, who we had on the show today, Lee Zeldin, Matt Gaetz, that know how to weaponize information, and particularly know how to go outside the Fox sphere. Fox is incredibly important, particularly for the conservatives, the Republicans in the base, but to go on MSNBC, to go on CNN, to talk to the New York Times, to talk to the Washington Post, to be able to take nuggets and to present those in a way that can break through and actually get independents and maybe even some Democrats to listen.
As you say, how to break the fever.
Exactly.
But this is what I understand. Why has there not, when you talk about Friday, that makes me even more frustrated. You have a historic day tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to set the narrative framework for how it goes. How could they even be thinking, this is so Republican, how can you be thinking about Friday? Either get it done tonight, and you're going to have to make some tough calls, and particularly for the members of the committee that are retiring. There's no reason at all for them to be here. Am I wrong in that?
No, and especially someone like Will Hurd, a Republican who constantly fights with President Trump, who doesn't believe in unmasking the whistleblower, who doesn't support President Trump on any of his border policies. I mean, he actively works against President Trump. In fact, you know where Will Hurd has been over the last couple days? Just saw this clip as I was driving in. He's been in New Hampshire campaigning for some state senator reelect. So I don't know if he's trying to lay the groundwork for 2024, but you take Hurd and you take Conaway. What the heck are they still doing on that committee? Get them out, get the killers in place. Every single day of this is Game 7 in the World Series for President Trump.
There's not some 4D chess going on here by the leader.
No, not at all. This is like
What are they spinning though as the reason?
I don't even
Too
think
many internal.
I think they're just.
I think they said these guys are on the committee. We
Right.
selected the committee, and that's the committee.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way they think. They don't think about this special. Let's go to, let's talk about any follow-up to the Cooper testimony, and then I want to get to Jason and Brother Kent.
Well, look, again, this morning, we mentioned at length, and people can go back and listen to episode 24, we mentioned at length the Laura Cooper testimony that was dripped out last night. Obviously, Veterans Day, national holiday, this thing drips out last night. It means the Democrats don't want you to read it, don't want people to go through it. Now, if I was a Republican staffer on the Hill, if I was in any sort of leadership position, if I had any staffers underneath me on the Hill, the first thing I would have said is, hey, hope you've had a great Veterans Day. Please read this thing overnight, and I need the top lines out of it, and they need to be briefed out in the morning, and I need to be on television and the radio talking about it tomorrow morning. Nobody has been doing that today. Nobody's gone through Laura Cooper's testimony and shown what should be common knowledge in this whole process, that it was fundamentally in the president's power. So she had to admit, when cross-examined by the Republicans in the House, she had to admit the foreign military sales is totally within the president's power to cease, to suspend, and if he wanted to fully rescind it, i.e. not give it over at all, then yeah, down the line in September he would have had to notify Congress about this. But when asked if he was supposed to do that at that point in time, she says it wasn't yet time that would be required. And that's a lot of what hinges this, what this Democrat impeachment process hinges on. Oh, this is an abuse of power. It's completely within his power. And yet the Laura Cooper testimony is not being touted out there as something that's very positive for President Trump, which in fact it is.
Why do you not see people in House staffs weaponizing this, pulling out those nuggets and putting it out there? I mean, look, we're not only proud to do it, it's our duty to do it, and that's what we're doing here on our website, warroom.org. You're listening to War Room Impeachment with Jason Miller, Raheem Kassam, Stephen K. Bannon. I mean, this is a function of a war room. This is what you do. You go through those details. Why is it not being done by people on the Hill?
I think a couple of things. I think too many folks are tentative on the Hill, don't really know what to do here. I think maybe they're feeling that they're not getting the proper direction or leadership, maybe it be from the White House or the RNC, and they don't want to get out over their skis and do anything that gets them in trouble. I think that's fundamentally it. Here's the other thing too, Steve, is that, look, I feel like I'm old now. I'm 44 now. There are other folks, obviously, who are more advanced than that. We were around the last time this happened for the Clintons. I was, 23. I'd been on 2 campaigns at that point. Think about a lot of folks here in town.
Were not born.
They weren't around.
They were not.
And so
they were a glint in their mother's eye.
Right. So now I feel like the old guy saying, darn you kids, I had to walk uphill to school both ways when I was younger. But there's a lot of that. Just a lot of folks here weren't around the last time. They don't know what this is like. They don't realize the enormity of what's going to happen when tomorrow hits us.
I have to just add to
Yeah, go
that.
ahead.
Whenever I speak to people, especially my age, I'm 33 and younger, about this, the response is always, I'm sure somebody else is doing it. I'm sure that's already been tossed out. And so they won't touch it. They won't take any initiative over it.
No, you have to. You don't do yourself. Let's get off Cooper for a minute. We're going to have more time to go through her stuff during the week. Let's go to Brother Kent.
Yeah. So Steve and Raheem, this is really our
And he's an opening day guy. So
He's opening-
it's Taylor and Kent. So that's like showtime tomorrow. This guy makes his appearance before the nation.
Yeah, and this, Steve, this is really our 106 miles to Chicago. We've got a full tank of gas moment, so I'm going to start powering through this. So tomorrow, we have Bill Taylor, the current U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, as well as George Kent. So who is George Kent? Well, exactly. He is the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs, which I imagine does fit onto one business card. But what that means is he's overseeing everything Ukraine-related for the U.S. State Department. He's a career guy within state and foreign service, decades of Ukraine experience. And according to his closed-door testimony, he was regularly talking with his buddy, Ambassador Bill Taylor, who had heard about Trump's call with Ukraine's president from the person who set it up, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman. So we're getting into the third and fourth hand things here. But again, these are their opening day pictures, so it's important to come back to this. And even the Washington Post, Amber Phillips, who's a good reporter there, wrote, but rather talking about how distant, or rather from other officials who talked to people who talked to Trump. So even in the most favorable press that he could get, they're saying it's fourth hand BS.
The chain of title here is fourth hand.
Right. And also keep in mind that Kent also had whined that former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, had been sacked on, I pronounced it correctly that time.
did.
Raheem nodded in approval. But Kent was really upset about this. But here's where worldviews and people's backgrounds matter. Steve, you were famous in the White House. We're saying that personnel becomes policy. And so let's take a look at George Kent's background. Graduated in 1989 with a degree in Russian history and literature from Harvard. I know you went to Harvard Business, so won't beat up on Harvard too much. I probably couldn't have gotten in. But then he got a master's.
Probably.
Okay, I couldn't have gotten in. He then earned a master's from Johns Hopkins at SACE, the school there.
Another Ivy League equivalent.
Right. Then he's been in the State Department Foreign Service since '92. He speaks Ukrainian, Russian, Thai, Polish, German, Italian. He's been all around the place. But here's where it starts getting interesting. Keep in mind, he was assigned to serve as a deputy political counselor in Kiev from 04 to 07, which not only was the period around the Orange Revolution, but this is also when Bill Taylor was ambassador to Ukraine. So these two folks, their opening day pictures, have histories
Go way back.
that go way back. And so it's very, and he was also, Kent, he was also the senior anti-corruption coordinator for the State Department's European Bureau in 14 and 15.
Oh, since Ukraine's the most corrupt country in Europe, according to The Guardian, he probably had a focus on Ukraine on that too.
Exactly. So think about it. So someone who's not going to be happy by someone saying we need to take a different approach to corruption in Ukraine is going to be one George Kent. Here's where it gets a little interesting.
By the way, people in the Foreign Service working together over many decades, like in the military, is not an unusual thing, particularly if you gravitate to a specialty.
Right. But when you look at the way that Kent and Taylor's paths have intertwined, and then
A buddy movie?
Exactly. Here we are, the Jake and Elwood, going back to my earlier pop culture reference. But the fact
I didn't catch that. No, I just did.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, the Blues Brothers.
And full,
that was
full
very-
tank of gas, pack of smokes. Yeah, the Blues Brothers. So it's, instead of Jake and Elwood, we have Bill and George.
That was better. That was even better than Meadows, the Senate thing this morning for the House.
That was pretty. It was such a deep troll, you didn't even get it. But here's where I think people need to realize. So George Kent has gone completely native here. And I've kind of taken a step back and taken a very measured approach to this. Look, some of the mainstream media reports have said that Kent loves Ukraine, loves the people, the culture. I don't know if Ukraine-phile is an official word. So George Kent met his wife when he was stationed in Uzbekistan. She's a Crimean Tatar. And her grandparents were moved out of Crimea to Uzbekistan in the 1940s. It was terrible what the Soviets did.
Yep.
And so George Kent met his wife there. So I can see where obviously Ukraine would be of interest to their family because this is part of her family's history. Kent's adult daughter describes herself on her public LinkedIn profile as a Crimean Tatar American. So I did not realize that was classification, and she hosts a kind of a Crimean and Tatar related podcast in Kiev. has posted freak Ukraine memes on her public Facebook page. But so this is just weird. I don't know how to say this. I'll dive right into it. So George Kent and his wife proudly posted on their public Facebook pages their Virginia vanity plates reading KRYMUA, which is Ukrainian for the Crimean Peninsula, and another car, QIRIMUA, which is Crimean Tatar for the Crimean Peninsula. And of course, UA is a reference to Ukraine. And the post that they put up on this, and this is their public Facebook post, Crimea is Ukraine, on the 5th anniversary of the Crimean resistance to Russian occupation. Here's our hers, multilingual Virginia Department of Transportation issued license plates reaffirming international law, U.S. policy, and personal belief. Quirium UA and Crim UA. So if you see someone driving around the mean streets of Arlington or in Foggy Bottom with Quirium UA and Crim UA, that's how deep they are into this. Which
these folks are all in.
These guys, this is all in.
This, in Stephanie Grisham's defense, isn't this what she meant by radicalized bureaucrats?
Yes, I think so, to a degree. I think you argue that. Yes, absolutely.
And so, look, why do I make these points? It's because when you're literally putting on personalized vanity plates about free Ukraine, like in two languages on two different cars, when you have this history of working in the anti-corruption unit, which by the way didn't go so well, right? I don't think we'd give a passing grade to how it did. When you've previously served in the station there a decade and a half ago, you are going to have such formed opinions on Ukraine and on Russia that you're not going to listen to a new president like Trump coming in and saying we're going to take a different approach to some of the failed policies of both parties from the last 2 decades. That is what I mean by personnel becomes policy. This is someone who's so entrenched in their own worldview that they're never going to go and change anything. And like I said, Kent was the deputy political counselor in Ukraine from 2004 to 2007, and Bill Taylor was the U.S. ambassador during that time. So the fact that these two have worked together multiple times, and then again recently, because Kent was reappointed back to Ukraine in September 18, Taylor was put back in there when Yovanovitch was sacked in 19. The fact that these are the two opening day pictures is kind of this Jake and Elwood movie. This sounds like a whole lot of.
I don't think we're going to jump for a commercial break. Hopefully have a special guest if we can get them on here. This is War Room Impeachment. Stephen K. Bannon, Jason Miller, Raheem Kassam. We'll take a short commercial break. Have a special guest return. We're going to get back into Brother Kent when we return on War Room Impeachment, John Frederick's Radio Network.
War Room Impeachment. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to War Room Impeachment, 12 November, year of our Lord 2019. We're broadcasting live on the John Fredericks Radio Network in the War Room, the first floor of the Breitbart Embassy, yards from the Supreme Court and right across the plaza from the United States Capitol, where tomorrow at 10 a.m. History will start with the live, televised nationally, broadcast nationally, impeachment hearings of the 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Our show is a temporary show. We're going to be here every day, 7 days a week, in the morning, 9 a.m. To 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until the day after Donald Trump is acquitted. In fact, Jason, we're going to get back into later. Richard Burr, I think today at Wake Forest, actually said that trial could take 6 to 8 weeks. We'll get to more of that in a few minutes. Very historic day tomorrow. Raheem, let's put it in perspective here. How do you view the difference between what we've done to date, the secret star chamber of Nancy Pelosi during the political warfare operation, the Matt Gaetz break the fever, at least some sort of transmission of transcripts, and now tomorrow the next phase, which is the public hearings.
Look, I keep explaining to people that what we've seen so far has been the auditions, the Democrats auditioning people down in that skiff in order to make them valid witnesses or not, people that they want to come forward for the public hearings or not. You'll remember, and the data prove this out, and Yahoo's got a good story about this up today, that the further along people have understood publicly presidents under the spotlight, whether it's impeachment or any other scandal, the further along this move publicly, the more and more public opinion has traditionally moved against them. And that's what the Democrats are seeking to recreate here. They don't want the Tim Morrisons of the world going up there and saying, actually, there was no quid pro quo. So they've kind of casting couched him out of that whole process. Now what we're seeing is the I think this term is applicable. The radicalized bureaucrats, people like George Kenton. In the first part of the show, Jason Miller did a wonderful job breaking down just who is George Kent, not just who is George Kent in terms of his experience and his jobs that he's had, but who is he personally and what is he bringing to the table as far as Ukraine is concerned. It is very clear and abundantly clear, and it was abundantly clear to me on the first day we did this show where I said it's a policy difference. It's abundantly clear to me that these people, there are people out there in the US political establishment who are not working in the US national interest right now, who may have split interest. George Kent has a very, very strange obsession with Crimea, a very personal and emotional obsession, to the point where he's changed his license plate, his car license plate, to reflect that position. These people should not be the ones being relied upon when we talk about the impeachment of a
what
president.
Jason, jump in here, but what Jason just went through is, and I want to tie it back to the United Kingdom, because our State Department is modeled upon the Foreign Office. The Foreign Office had a massive problem. It's called clientism, right? I think they called certain groups in there the Arabist, right? That would go to the Middle East and fall in love with Arab culture and actually start to
scarf on their head.
and start to take on T.E. Lawrence is a great example where you would actually take on the interest of the client and clientism. Is that what Kent represents? Is that what we're talking about here? Is that in not denigrating their patriotism or who they are, but they have fallen in love with and taking the interest of the country that they represent themselves, and President Trump is elected on an American first. And what America first means is, by the way, we now have I'll get off my tirade, we now have our very special guests here. We're now joined by America's Mayor, Rudy Giuliani. Mayor, thank you for being back here on War Room Impeachment.
Well, it's a pleasure to be back. How are you?
Sir, it's great. Listen, you got Jason, Raheem, Steve. Here's the thing: is tomorrow begins history. You've been around a long time. Can you put in context what the nation's going to see tomorrow?
Well, I think we're going to see a real assault on the Constitution and on the Republic. This is a very, very dangerous thing that the Democrats are doing. It's not at all an impeachment as was intended by the founders.
Why is it dangerous?
Well, because it's not based on any crime, any wrongdoing. It's based on a misinterpretation of a conversation. That even if you use the misinterpretation, wouldn't have been a crime. It's been completely orchestrated by Adam Schiff with these 2 weeks of secret hearings, selective leaking, so that you prejudice the public. There have been no rights granted the subject, the President of the United States, none. Completely devoid of due process, no right of counsel, no right to question anyone. So now, after having completely prejudiced everyone, they're going to hold these show hearings in order to see if they can prejudice the public more and propound a big lie. So I say that probably this is exactly what Mark Zaid described in January 2017, which is a coup. To illegally remove the President of the United States.
Mayor Giuliani, we have Mayor Giuliani in War Room Impeachment, Stephen K. Bannon, Jason Miller, Raheem Kassam. Raheem just said a minute ago, Mayor, that what Schiff has done in the Secret Star Chamber is essentially do an audition or a tryout to curate what they believe are the worst witnesses against the president and to broom everybody else, Morrison and any kind of exculpatory testimony. Do you believe that?
I do. I think what they've done is they've practiced really in a masterful way the big lie. They had a conversation in which they originally said that President Trump threatened President Zelensky with taking away $400 million in military aid if he didn't go ahead and investigate Biden. Well, the fact is the conversation doesn't say that. But they have, through selective leaking and selective interpretation, they've put forward witnesses who have interpreted the conversation, which we can read for ourselves, to say that the president asked for a quid pro quo. I mean, how ridiculous is it for that ambassador to say there was a quid pro quo? We can read the conversation. There is no quid pro quo.
And to
The
that
public
point,
doesn't read the conversation. They just listen to all of this propaganda.
To that point, Mr. Mayor, when we were talking earlier, you brought up what you called the entire phone call with President Zelensky and President Trump on July 25th. You referred to it as the unimpeachable conversation. Give us a sense of what you mean by that. I know you talked about how Ukrainian corruption has been raging for years, that President Trump had a constitutional obligation, there's no demand, that President Zelensky said he wasn't pressured, no quid pro quo. And the heart of the matter is really, like you said, the big lie to try to undermine the 2016 and 2020 elections. Give us a little more, elaborate on this unimpeachable conversation that you and I touched base on earlier.
Well, I challenge anyone to read that transcript and come away with any feeling of pressure, coercion, untoward conduct. I mean, it's a perfectly normal conversation between two heads of state in which they first talk about what President Trump loves to talk about, how Europe isn't spending enough on Ukraine. And Zelensky, by the way, is agreeing with him, and they make a little joke about Angela Merkel. And then it's Zelensky who first brings up draining the swamp. So he's the one that first brings it over to corruption.
Critical point.
And,
that is a critical point.
Right? And then Trump says, "You're darn right there's corruption. Look what they did in 2016. Do me a favor, look into it." He doesn't say, "You must look into it. I demand you look into it. If you don't look into it, I'm going to break your kneecaps." He doesn't say what Biden said. "You better fire the prosecutor or you don't get your money." He doesn't say any of that. However, just think about this. All the witnesses they put out there, the State Department, fancy pants people, say they were shocked by the conversation. They almost cried over the conversation. If you can cry over that conversation, you are seriously in need of Trump derangement medicine.
Mayor Giuliani, this is Steve. They've taken it in a different direction in the last 48 hours. They've dropped quid pro quo. They feel that you either were not an altar boy early on, you don't know enough Latin, so they've now focused on extortion, extortion and bribery. Extortion and bribery. You were one of the leading prosecutors in this country. You put the 5 families away. You put Milken and all the thugs on Wall Street away. It's extortion and bribery. Do they have a case against the President of the United States on extortion and bribery?
Well, first of all, in order to have a bribery case, forget the Latin or whatever, you have to have a quid pro quo. So there's no bribery case. That's just another way of saying no bribery case. Bribery is offering something of value in exchange for official action. The president offered nothing, and he asked for a favor. He didn't demand anything, which takes the extortion out of it. Also, to have extortion, the victim has to feel pressured. So Zelensky's testimony that I didn't feel pressured is the key to an extortion case. Somebody else can feel pressured, but if Zelensky's not pressured, there's no extortion. And then if you look at the words in the conversation, these are not words of extortion or bribery. Believe me, I've never had a bribery case or an extortion case where, Fat Tony walked up to someone and said, "Hey, do me a favor, pay me my money back. If you don't pay me my money back, I'm going to blow your brains out."
Right. Mayor Giuliani, this is Raheem. I wanted to frame just for people, because a lot of people forget that call was had immediately after Mueller had testified. It was public. It was in the mind of the president, and that's why, as far as anybody reasonable can probably tell, that's why he raised 2016 on that call. But also, people are forgetting that Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, has given over so many interviews now about this to the Japanese newspapers, to newspapers at home, and every single time he's perfectly clear that he didn't feel there was any pressure. He didn't feel it was inappropriate. So how do you have have, Bill Taylor and George Kent going up there and saying, oh, well, this was obviously inappropriate and the president of Ukraine was acting under duress, when the president of Ukraine himself is saying, what are you talking about? It's total nonsense.
Well, in a trial on extortion, their testimony would be irrelevant. We don't allow opinion testimony. Your opinion of whether I feel pressured is irrelevant. Was I pressured or wasn't I? The only testimony that would be relevant is Zelensky, and he sure enough is able to speak for himself. And you can also tell from the tenor of the conversation that there was no sense of pressure. It was a very cordial conversation. And this whole thing with a meeting, that they were holding out a meeting, the president agreed to a meeting with him in the middle of that conversation. The president said, we'll meet in Warsaw, and if I don't go to Warsaw, we'll then meet at the UN, which is what they did. And then the president went ahead and said, I thought it was kind of cute, more or less, if you're ever in the neighborhood, stop in. He says, if you're in Washington, come and say hello. And Zelensky says, if you're in Kiev, I'd love to show you the town. I mean, this is a perfectly normal conversation that these craven Democrats have twisted. I've never seen anything as dishonest.
Look, you're a prosecutor. You know the theater and the drama of a courtroom. Why are they starting tomorrow, in your mind, with Ambassador Taylor and Kent? Why did they choose, of everything they could do, why are they going with Taylor and Kent out of the box?
Well, because they were the ones who were the clearest on quid pro quo, bribery. Taylor, by the way, said something about me that's ridiculous. He said that he believes that I started the whole thing.
That's
hilarious
funny.
Because he's never talked to me.
That's funny that Taylor would say that, considering that, as we just talked about in the segment before you jumped on, Mr. Mayor, that he and George Kent go all the way back to the mid-2000s when they're both stationed in Kiev, that they've had these intertwined careers that have been going on for decades now, and then two gentlemen who weren't on the call, who had third or fourth-hand information, on a best day, third-hand information.
Well, information he has about me is completely inaccurate. In fact, I didn't know anything much about this until Volker called me up on July 19th, and luckily I kept the text message and asked me if I would talk to Mr. Yermak, which I did under the direction of the State Department. Also, George Kent's got a problem of his own. George Kent wrote a letter in which he asked that a case be dismissed by Lutsenko, and it was the case against Soros' NGO Antac. And that company Antac was right in the middle of gathering a lot of the dirty material on Trump, Donald Trump Jr. It worked with Fusion GPS. The dismissal of that case has cost the government a lot of evidence that could be very, very damning with regard to collusion. But there's enough left. I mean, there's enough evidence left of collusion so that you've got a very, very strong case that the DNC and that Hillary Clinton were paying for and gathering information from Ukrainians. In fact, some of it is even documentary evidence.
Do you believe that we have the right? I mean, we've had this situation, what we call the killers, the Matt Gaetzes, the Mark Meadows, the Lee Zeldins being on this committee tomorrow. Do you believe that the Republicans are prepped? Do you think they're prepared? Do you think they are ready to do a cross-examination so that the nation can see the issues that you're talking about?
Well, I hope so. I mean, I would like to cross-examine George Kent. I mean, George Kent was her deputy. He was Maria Yovanovitch's deputy. He was also the guy that helped set up the two so-called anti-corruption bureaus.
Yes.
In the Ukraine that turned out to be Soros protection bureaus.
Oh,
what do you mean? What? Hold on. What do you mean by that, Mayor? Go in some depth.
Okay, so George Kent helped to set up for George Soros, as Soros did in several other Eastern European countries, the special prosecutor's offices. So that sounds very, very good. They're fighting corruption. So the special prosecutor takes all the corruption cases away from the prosecutor general, because the prosecutor general is supposed to be corrupt. But then what happens is all of the cases against Soros's companies and NGOs are dismissed. The cases against Soros's enemies are brought. And then the cases that the State Department doesn't want brought, they direct them to drop. Kent is on record writing to them, interfering in a criminal case and a criminal investigation on behalf of George Soros.
Mr. Mayor, let me ask you.
I'd like to see him questioned about that. I'd like to see.
Well,
him
like to see.
back-
But hang, like to see. Is Jim Jordan, the Jim Jordan, Devin Nunes? I mean, are these people prepped and prepared to answer tough questions?
Devin knows as much, if not more, than I do about this.
Good. That's reassuring to hear because we're concerned. We've been talking, Mr. Mayor, about some of the
Taylor, I don't know as well. I kind of have a feeling. About him, like, he's sort of a State Department guy, deep State Department guy. When I turned my information over to Pompeo in March or April, I was told there'd be an internal investigation because it raised these questions about not only the ambassador Jovanovic, but about Kent, and that had to be investigated. Well, it was never investigated, never.
Did you do a written report, or was this a verbal?
I did an outline. I think you've seen it, Jason. I did an outline of all the evidence that I had acquired at that point, which was up to about March 28th of 2019, and it included the ambassador Jovanovic dismissing 4 cases, getting Lutsenko to dismiss 4 cases. It included her passing along information damaging the Trump campaign, using the headquarters as a Hillary Clinton headquarters, working with Glenn Simpson and Fusion GPS, and also being implicated in the Black Ledger book, which was, according to a Ukrainian court, illegally supplied to both the prosecutors and the New York Times.
Mayor, we've got to bounce, but before we let you go, how, in this complexity of the Ukraine and its corruption and everything like that, how succinctly tomorrow can the Republicans ask the questions and present it so then afterwards on TV, in the mainstream media, on CNN and MSNBC, that this construct can go out there? How can they actually do this?
Well, they did an awfully good job. With Mueller. Of course, Mueller probably wasn't operating with full capacity, but they were awfully good against Mueller. I think they can do a pretty effective cross-examination. Of course, on MSNBC and CNN will never show it. I mean, it's the same thing with Schiff. For the last 2 weeks, Schiff walks out and gives whatever he thinks is damaging. And then our guys would come out and point out some very, very powerful stuff. But then you would never see our stuff on NBC, MSNBC, CNN. But hopefully, since they're going to be live, there'll be a chance to really dramatically display some of this.
Mayor Giuliani, thank you so much. A great honor to have you on again, and we're going to look for your commentary the next couple of days as the opening salvo starts in this historic national broadcast tomorrow.
Yeah, and thank you for what you're doing. It's very important to the country.
Mayor Giuliani, America's mayor, thank you very much. Want to go back to Raheem. Raheem, you had Mayor Giuliani lay out the details of this corruption. You talked about Kent, all this. You've gone through all the documents. You've gone through all this. How are they supposed to frame this tomorrow? Obviously, Schiff and the Democrats have a way they're going to do it. In our closing couple of minutes, how do the Republicans get on top of the narrative, and the narrative being the president did nothing wrong, the conversation was fine, and along the lines of what Mayor Giuliani's talking about?
Yeah, so there are flashpoints in all of these testimonies where you see that the Republicans in the House who are doing the counter-questioning, who are doing the cross-examination of the witnesses, are pretty across their briefs. You can see it from and these are the staffers, remember, these aren't the congressmen. These are the staffers in the Intel Committee. It comes down to granularity, as we've said over and over and over again, because the other side is going to try and portray this with a broad brush just sweeping statements about abuse of power, sweeping statements of it. There's not going to be much drilling down on their side. They'll say, oh, on July the 24th you learned this, and then on September the 1st this happened. But if you get into like the granularity that Mayor Rudy Giuliani was just talking about, if you get into the granularity about what we've been talking about on this show, about the testimonies of Laura Cooper saying that, you know, when they learned that there was a hold on the information, 3 questions came back. There was U.S. industry-related questions, things like that, but there was no quid pro quo questions that came back from the White House to the Defense Department or the State Department. And yet, all of these guys were just focused. They said their focus was releasing the money, not answering the president's questions. It's that kind of thing that will save this president.
Okay, we're on the eve of a historic impeachment inquiry. It will be nationally broadcast tomorrow on all the broadcast networks and cable. We're going to be here live on the John Fredericks Radio Network at 9 a.m. from the Breitbart Embassy to go through all the details and to prep it. Raheem, talk to us about the podcast. How can people get the podcast? What do they have to do on the podcast?
Go to warroom.org, or you can search for War Room Impeachment on any of the podcast platforms. At warroom.org, there's a thing at the top that says podcast. Make sure you click through to your preferred thing and ensure you hit subscribe and leave us a nice review, why don't you?
Jason Miller, Stephen K. Bannon, Raheem Kassam will be live on the John Fredericks Radio Network tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. on the historical first day of the impeachment inquiry of the 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.